welcome back to the My First Rodeo podcast, the show during which we speak to really cool, interesting, and famous people about the various firsts on their paths to success. Today is no exception. We have Dave McGillivray, who I hope I haven't butchered his name because the man deserves appropriate recognition. He has done Herculean things, and I don't use that term or expression lightly. I thought I did something cool. I'm going to tell you what I did, and then I'm going to tell you how insignificant it is. Even after, for a moment, you're going to go, that's really cool. So if you don't know, I created something called Freed to Run. 6 marathons over 6 days to raise money for pediatric patients through Jacksonville Area Legal Aid. We did that for 7 years, 6 marathons, 6 days, and then added a 24-hour run to raise money for indigent seniors who are housing insecure. Freedtorun.com. You can check it out and donate, all that good stuff. I personally ran 6 marathons over 6 days, 157.2 miles for 7 years, and then ran the first of the 24-hour runs, which was last year. I've done some other 24-hour runs and 100-mile runs and some cool things, but that's nothing. I should pause for a minute and let you say, wow, that's cool. I can't imagine somebody could do that. But if you're listening to this podcast and you've come to listen to this interview of Dave, you probably already know that that's nothing compared to what Dave McGillivray did. He ran from Medford, Oregon to Medford, Massachusetts, 3,452 miles over 80 days. He did a similar run over similar breakdown of miles per day, which is like 30 to closer to 50 miles a day for 80 days straight. On the East Coast, 1,250 miles, each of those to raise money for the Jimmy Fund, which raises money for the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. He is the race director of the Boston Marathon. He's run the Boston Marathon for 52 years straight, since the age of 12, and he's now 70. He's run his age in birthday miles every year. So 12 wasn't so bad, but his this past year, or rather this year, he just turned 70. So 70 miles for that birthday. The man did 32 days of triathlons. That's the mile swim. That's an 80-mile bike ride and almost a marathon distance in running. 20 miles a day was the nature of the triathlon that he did around the New England area. 32 days of that. Can you imagine? And then if that's not enough, 7 marathons in 7 days over 7 continents. Just a few of the many accomplishments that he did, all to raise money for various charities. He's a race director, not just of Boston Marathon, but of the Olympic Trials, Olympic Games, and all kinds of really cool runs and famous runs, and then some lesser known, but really, really cool, like marathons in maximum security prisons. You see, the man is just electric, a ton of energy. And, what we talk about is not even about running, although that's certainly the platform for all the really cool things that he does. I think you're going to be excited about this conversation. It harkens back to some of the other running and racing champions and experts that we've had on the show. So I think you're going to enjoy this conversation. This is me talking to Dave McGillivray. Dave, thanks for being with us today. I'm so grateful to have you. I told you off air that I had the privilege of hearing you speak, and I suppose running adjacent to you in a metaphoric sense at the most recent Boston Marathon, which was my first, but it was your 52nd. And, I've let folks know all your other accomplishments, which are so many and so running based and athletic based in a sense, but also in a sense, and I love that you call yourself an athlete. You certainly are an athlete, but it's what you use your athleticism and your platform for that I think makes you the Herculean person that you are, and the one that I admire and frankly kind of aspire to be in so many ways. And it seems to me that you are using every little bit of energy and productivity out of, and you and I share this, about 5'4" something frame to do, it sounds a little virtue signally when I say it, but good in the world and do as much positive and positivity and encouraging as you can with that frame. Is that a fair encapsulation of who you see yourself as?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it very much. It's always fun to chat with folks like yourself about the past, the present, and maybe a little bit about the future, what might be in store. But for me, I appreciate the kind accolades about the philanthropy, but it's an interesting dynamic for me because I do it for two reasons. One is for the good, but I also do it because it makes me feel good about myself. So it's a two-way street. And the more I can give, then the more I receive in return. And that's what keeps the furnace burning and furnace hot to don't look back, keep on going forward.
I love it. So, the show's called My First Rodeo, so we're gonna start back. But I'm sure you've had plenty of time to think about it. Where does that come from? I mean, that's not a normal thing, that you're certainly around a lot of people that do good and want to do good and aspire to do good. But the average person either doesn't have that in them, or at least doesn't foster it, or maybe they've just had it crushed out of them. Where does your desire to do good come from, and what got that furnace, as you call it, lit in the first place?
Well, it all started for me when I was a young boy growing up in my hometown of Medford, Mass, and right outside of Boston. And obviously, people know Boston as a very sports orientated minded community. So that's all I was surrounded with was the Red Sox, the Patriots, the Bruins, the Celtics. And for me, I always wanted to be a professional athlete, but I was short in stature. And so I was always the last one picked when my friends picked sides, or always the last one cut when I went out for teams. So then I decided to run because nobody can catch you from running. And then I decided in 1978 to run across the United States from Medford, Oregon to my hometown of Medford, Mass. But I knew then as a 20-year-old that I needed to combine that with something greater than myself, or I may never make it. So I aligned myself with the Jimmy Fund of Boston, which is the fundraising arm of the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, which you know so well. And that's when it all started for me. Runner's World said that was the first time somebody had combined running with raising money for cancer research. So that just helped me going during the tough times as I ran across the country. And I've been doing that kind of thing, raising money for a greater purpose than myself ever since.
Yeah, that's amazing. So I know you started running at about age, I want to say 12. I know that's the first time you did your 12 miles for your 12th birthday. Is that about right?
Yeah. So, I mean, I ran to stay in shape for the other sports I was participating in. But, and then I had this epiphany when I was 12 years old. I went out that morning on my birthday and ran 6 miles around a local pond. And later on that night, I just decided to do it again. And coincidentally, it added up to 12 miles on my 12th birthday, and I'm a streak freak. And so even at a young age, so when I turned 13, I did 13 and 14, 14. And, you get the gist here of where that was heading. And so just a couple of days ago, I turned 70 in about 6 weeks. So I had to figure out how am I going to run 70 miles on my 70th birthday. But I decided to split it up into running and biking. So I ran a marathon distance and then biked the rest just a few days ago to equal 70 miles for my 70th birthday coming up.
That's amazing. So I know you're asked this all the time, but gosh, you've done it from 12 to 70. You've done it every year since. How long you plan to keep doing it?
Well, it's one of those things where why stop if I'll continue to do it until I can't.
Yeah.
So, and it's a connection with the past too. And I have a motto in my life, and it's my game, so it's my rules.
Yeah.
So it's my life, and it's my rules to live by. And if I want to change the rules of the game, then I can do it. Because I only have to answer to myself. And so I'll keep doing what I need to do to keep moving, especially using my birthday as a magnet, as a target to stay in shape, because I have a big thing coming up, celebrating the birthday and covering the distance, which equals the number of years I've been on this planet.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I love it's your rules motto. I mean, obviously, you have a commitment to something higher than yourself. And most importantly, it seems to me a commitment to humanity. But at the same time, you don't get so caught in the streaks that you don't find other ways to do positivity. If that's run, walking, biking. I mean, I'm probably right. Tell me if I'm wrong. You've never, although certainly going 3,452 miles in 80 days is amazing. Full stop. You've probably not won too many marathons. That's not your goal. Your goal is to do something Herculean, challenge yourself, and to use that awesomeness, the fact that you're doing something noteworthy as an attraction to people, to give to a cause. In your case, oftentimes combating cancer, particularly in children, right?
That's exactly right. I mean, there's only one person in a race of, say, 30,000, like the Boston Marathon, that can literally cross the finish line first.
Right.
So, and for me, it's a matter of setting my own personal goals. And more than anything else is what I call earning the right, doing the work to earn the right, to toe the line, to even attempt it. I don't do too many things on barroom bets, right? I think about it. What do I want to do next? I plan it out. I train. I commit to myself, and then I commit to family, friends, the charity I might be raising money for, and then get out and accomplish it.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. So there's a wonderful story I had the opportunity to hear you tell in the Your Game, Your Rules idea or concept or example of a beautiful little girl who came to your office or wanted to come to your office. And I'll say, for the purpose of this story, and we'll get to it, that you are the director of the Boston Marathon, and she called you up and wanted to come visit you in that context. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I got a call from a woman named Katie, and she said, "Hi, my name's Katie. I'd like to come visit you at the Boston Marathon office." I said, "Fine." I don't deny anyone the opportunity to meet, to talk, have a conversation. I'm no better than anyone else. Sure, come on in. So she came in, and she was in a wheelchair, and she came into the conference room, and as I looked at her, my jaw dropped a little bit, because I recognized that Katie was, as it turned out, 36 inches tall. And she looked at me and she says, "I have a question to ask you." I said, "What's that?" She says, "Can I run the Boston Marathon?" I said, "You want to run the Boston Marathon?" She says, "Yeah, I'd like to run the Boston Marathon." And I paused for a minute and I just said, "Well, ask me a difficult question." She says, "Really? I can run?" I said, "Yeah, you can run. I can run the marathon." I said, "Yeah, you can run the marathon." She said, "Well, I have a caveat." I said, "What's that?" She said, "My marathon's 26.2 feet. I said, "Okay, I get it. 26.2 feet. I'm thinking in my head, her game, her rules. So I barricaded 26.2 feet from the starting line, just down the hill a little bit at the start of the marathon that year. And out comes Katie. She's in her wheelchair, gets out of her wheelchair, gets in her walker, and I yelled go, and she covered the 26.2 feet in about 7 minutes. And I put a laurel wreath on her head and a medal around her neck and gave her a big hug. And as the story goes, most people know that as the director of the marathon, I can't run it during the day. So I run it at night after my job's completed. So that day, I was running it at night and coming down the finish line in the dark around 10 o'clock at night. And I see this one lone figure waiting for me at the finish line. And it was Katie waiting for me. And she put a laurel wreath around my head that she had made me. and a medal around my neck that she had made me. And she looked up at me and she says, "Ha, I beat you." And so it just made me realize that, people, can still accomplish things based on what they're capable of doing. And she had about 35 operations at Children's Hospital, and she passed away a little bit after that time. And but I recognized the fact that at least she got the opportunity and succeeded at running in the Boston Marathon in her own way and manner, which I've never forgotten. That is the most special moment in my Boston Marathon history.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And obviously the 26 feet that she covered, again, a bigger athletic accomplishment in some respects than covering 26.2 miles for those of us that are blessed with good health.
So that's the whole lesson here, that, if you're determined enough and you do the work and earn the right, you can accomplish anything you want in life. What's interesting is, as I give motivational talks, especially to schools, a lot of times I get asked, "Well, what do you want to be when you grow up?" I'm like, I'm almost 70, and they're asking me what I want to be when I grow up. I said, "Well, what makes you think I want to grow up?" I said, "But I'm not really sure." And then I saw a billboard on the highway just a couple of years ago, and it had one word on it. And I said, "That's it. That's what I want to be. That's what I've always wanted to be." And the word was accomplisher. And that's just made me realize that in life, at least for me, and I think for a lot of people are in the same boat, that you want to, set goals, work hard, earn the right, accomplish something, whatever it is, check it off the list and move on to the next one.
Yeah. I mean, that's certainly that certainly describes well what you've done. I think it describes what you've been able to encourage other people to do. I've also heard you talk about the word relevancy, or being relevant. What does that word mean to you?
A lot of people say to me, "Why do you keep doing this? Why don't you get a lounge chair, a book, and go to the beach and just relax?" And I said, because my interpretation of relax is very different than most everyone else's. I relax by getting things done. If I'm just lying around not accomplishing anything, then I'm antsy and I feel like I'm just wasting time. We're only here on this planet for so long, and for me, I just want to continue to sort of just check things off the list. So that's how I roll, and that's why when asked what my best accomplishment is, I always say my best accomplishment is my next one.
Yeah.
It's like, what do you got for me lately? And it's not like I don't, I'm not proud of what I might have accomplished in the past. It's just that it's in the past. And I use it as a foundation of confidence to move forward, and always setting new goals for myself so that there's a target out there, there's a magnet that continues to keep drawing me, towards trying to accomplish the next big thing in my life.
Yeah, and I mean, what I admire so much and relate to in your story, I would say, is not just how you're always looking on to the next accomplishment and preparing yourself for it, but how so many things that you've endeavored to do have ended, or at least along the way, have been met with failure. I know your first two Boston marathons have some component of that. Can you talk about sort of how failure plays into the path to success?
Yeah, well, when I ran my first Boston Marathon, I was a senior in high school. I was 17. I didn't officially register because you had to be 18. And long story short, I had called up my grandfather, who lived right near the marathon course, around 24 miles. And I said, "Grandpa, I'm going to go run that race in Boston." He goes, "Oh, they call that the Boston Marathon." I said, "Oh, well, that's a good name for it." I said, "Well, I'm going to go run it." So My brother drove me to the start. I take off. I get to about 20 miles and boom, down I go in the hills in Newton. Got taken to the Newton Wellesley Hospital in an ambulance. And I finally get home and I call my grandfather. There's no answer. I call him again, no answer. Finally, 9:00 at night, he answers the phone. I say, Grandpa, where have you been? He goes, Dave, where have you been? I've been waiting for you all night. The old man, Kelly, goes by. The street sweepers go by. No Dave. I said, yeah, I know I failed. He said, what? I said, I quit. He goes, nah, you didn't quit. I said, what'd I do? He said, you learned. I said, what'd I learn? He said, you learn you cannot go along in life and set reckless goals. It's good to set goals, but you got to earn the right to do them. He said, I cut another deal with you. I said, what's that? He says, you train for this next year and I'll be here waiting for you. I said, deal. Well, 2 months later, my grandfather died. And I said, I got to do this. I got to do this for my grandfather. I trained. I officially registered. I was ready to go. And the day before the race, I got sick. My parents said, you can't run. I said, I have to run. The newspapers are saying, Dave, running in memory of grandfather. I said, can you give me something that very few people in my life have ever given me? And they said, what's that? I said, a chance. Isn't that all we ever want in life, is a chance to accomplish something, to do something meaningful, to make an impact? So they said, okay, they drove me to the start. I take off. I get to the point where I dropped out the year before. I'm feeling awful. I'm doing the survivor shuffle over the hills. I got to 21 and a half miles and bam, down I go again. Drop out 2 years in a row. Theoretically failed 2 years in a row. I'm sitting on the curb, head in my hand, saying I'm always the last one picked, the last one cut. I drop out of my first. I drop out of my second Boston. Can you say like loser? Because that's what's going on in my head. And then a defining moment happened to me right there, sitting there at the 21 and a half mile mark. And I turned around and I noticed where I was for the first time. And I was sitting in front of the Evergreen Cemetery, and that's where they buried my grandfather. And there was a tombstone right there. And that son of a gun said he'd be there waiting for me. Now, maybe he wasn't there physically. He was there spiritually. So I picked myself up and I finished in 4.5 hours. And I said on that day in April 1973, I was going to run this race every year for the rest of my life in honor and tribute of the lesson my grandfather taught me about earning the right to do these kinds of things. So what I actually did learn is that in life, there's only one way you can fail, and that's not to try. Because if you try and you don't necessarily accomplish everything you had hoped to, it's not failure. It's a learning experience. You take what you learned in that effort and you put it towards the next one. And that goes to that whole concept of being relevant. I mean, for me, it's hard to just talk about the past. I want to talk about the present. I want to always be relevant and continuing to do things that make me relevant on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously you've done that and you continue to do that. It's been 52 Boston marathons in a row. What year do you become the race director? And as you said, you no longer could run, obviously during the race, because that was sort of your baby, your responsibility. But you decide the first time you're race director to get the police officer to give you a ride to the start line, basically after the race had sort of finished, so that you could run the whole thing at your own pace, at your own time, and actually pretty good time, and be the last person to finish.
Yeah, so I had run it 15 years in a row and then get offered the job to help direct it. And I was like, what do I do? Do I run in it or do I help run it? And, I was just building my business at the time and building my career and my brand. And I said, how can I pass up the opportunity of helping to direct the most prestigious marathon in the world? So I took the job. And, I was so anxious throughout the months leading up to it, the weeks leading up to it, and the day off saying, I'm not going to be able to run this thing if I'm working all day. And I was at the finish line, high-fiving all the runners who had just completed the race. And I just felt full of self-pity. And even though I was glad for them and happy the race came off well, I was also saying to myself, there's an emptiness here. So I tapped a state police trooper on the shoulder and I said, officer, you do me a favor? He goes, what? I said, will you drive me back to the start? He goes, why? Did you forget something? I said, yeah, I forgot to run. So he drove me back at 8:00 at night. I took off and I finished a little after 11 o'clock at night, dead last. And for 36 years in a row, I've been the last finisher of the Boston Marathon. And, the way I look at it is for me, it's just continuing to fulfill my commitment to myself and to my grandfather that I was going to run this race every year for the rest of my life.
Yeah, that's amazing. And then I have to give you a little bit of crap because our guest on episode number 27 was the one and only Jack Fultz. So do you want to give full confession to have you actually finished last for the last 30 years?
Good point. So one year, the 1976 Boston Marathon winner, Jack Fultz, who's a dear friend of mine and does a lot of work for the Dana-Farber marathon team. So Jack agreed to run with me one year. And so we're running side by side for 26.1 miles. And we're heading towards the finish. And I'm slowing down a little bit so he can finish ahead of me. And he's slowing down a little bit so I can finish in front of him. And so I finished maybe a half a second ahead of him. And he actually came up right behind me. So I guess effectively I wasn't last that year. But the trivia question now remains, who is the only person to have both won the Boston Marathon and finished last?
Yeah.
And most people don't know the answer to that question, but it's Jack Fultz.
Yeah, that's almost worth taking a step ahead to allow him to have that accomplishment, which is pretty darn cool. So, I mean, some of the things you've done, are just difficult to conceptualize. I think I told you I have this little thing, Freed to Run, where we've raised about $2.5 million. We've run 6 marathons over 6 days for 7 years. We also have a 24-hour run now. And people, as you know, when people hear about something you're doing, whether it's a 100-mile run or whatever, they're like, that's amazing. Nobody can do that. And I'm like, yeah, there's actually a guy who's done 10 times more than me or 100 times more than me. So you ran from West Coast to East Coast, Medford, Oregon to Medford, Massachusetts, 3,452 miles over 80 days. So that's, 30, 40, 50 miles a day for 80 days straight. You did something similar running up the East Coast. Obviously, each of these for raising thousands and thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars for charity, about 1,200 and I want to say 50 miles up the East Coast. As we said, you've run Boston Marathon 52 times. Is this right? You did 32 days of triathlons. And then also, as we were talking when we came on air, 7 marathons in 7 days on 7 continents. Did I misstate any of that?
No, you hit the nail on the head. The triathlon one was my New England run, even though it was a swim, bike, run event. And I did that also for the Jimmy Fund in Boston, where I swam a mile wherever I could find a body of water, whether it was a pool or whether it was a lake or the ocean or wherever I was at the time. I biked 80 miles and ran 20 miles every single day for 32 consecutive days around New England. And, I finished that run in halftime of a New England Patriot football game in front of 60,000 people. So I finished in Fenway Park in front of 32,000 people. I finished in Gillette Stadium in front of 60,000 people. And people say to me all the time, why do you keep finishing in stadiums? I said, well, if I finished in front of my house, I'd have my mother, my father, 6 pigeons and 3 squirrels. I mean, I'm trying to raise awareness of a cause. I'm trying to raise money. So I'm going to go to where the people are. I'm not going to necessarily expect 30,000 people to come see me finish something.
Right.
And it's worked over the years. I mean, when you think about, I've helped direct about 1,600 events, whether it be triathlons, marathons, road races, charity walks, whatever, everything from Olympic Games to U.S. Olympic trials, national championships. I put on marathons over bridges, in tunnels, inside Fenway Park, inside Gillette Stadium, inside maximum security prisons, and the list goes on and on and on. And pretty much almost every single one of them have benefited a nonprofit,
right.
A good cause. And, literally maybe $300-400 million has been generated, not by me personally, but by events that I've been involved with, or maybe by something that I might have done personally in order to raise money for a charity. So that's the legacy. That's the thing I'm most proud of.
Yeah, and I like the balance that you strike. And I don't know if this resonates with you or not. In my own little way, challenge myself with this because there's you want to make the cause front facing. You want to be humble. People win things, they get awards, they say they're humbled by something. But at the same time, you got to be out there. You got to take some victory laps. You got to be front and center. Every cause needs a face. And so there's this balance of doing something selfless, but also standing front and center to, take your reputation, to take your accomplishment, to take the exciting, sensational thing you're doing that's getting the headline, and then taking that attention and giving it to the charity, giving it to the cause. Do you relate to that at all?
You just hit the nail on the head. That is the single most challenging aspect of all of this for me, because truly this isn't about me per se. I want to remain humble. I want to be grounded. I want to be appreciative and thankful for everything I have. But at the same time, to your point, you need to promote the brand. You need to have people listen. If I wanted to have people follow my guidance, if I want people to follow me in an event, then you have to have credibility. And the only way you're going to get credibility is if people know who you are and maybe what you have done. I don't try to tout it in a sense of like, look at me, aren't I good, aren't I great? No, it's like, if I can do it, you can do it. This is what I've done. I've done over 1,500 motivational speaking appearances to every single conceivable group you can imagine, from kindergartens, high schools, colleges, business groups, sales forces. I've spoken at everybody. And again, I always start off by saying, I'm going to talk about me, but trust me, this is all about you. This is about you. I want you to walk out that door feeling better about yourself than when you walked in. That's my goal. It isn't here to say, look how good I am, look at what I've done. It's like, this is what I've done, this is how I've done it, and you can do the same.
Yeah.
And just trying to motivate and inspire them to set goals and work hard and accomplish them. That's all I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
And it's funny because people say to me all the time, what do you do for a living? I said, well, I'm a race director. A race director? What the heck do they do? Chalk mark in the road, yell go? I said, well, yeah, I guess a little bit of that. But truly what I do is I try to help raise the level of self-confidence and self-esteem of tens of thousands of people in this country. Because that's what we do in this business. Because, when people, want to run a marathon, people ask me all the time, what's the toughest part about running a marathon? The toughest part about running a marathon is signing the application. It's having the guts and the courage and the commitment to do it. Then you earn the right, you toe the line, you answer the gun, you run the course, you cross the finish line, you get a medal, and magic happens. You feel good about yourself. And there's nothing more powerful in this world than to feel good about yourself, because it's the foundation by which we accomplish everything in our lives. That's all I'm trying to do in my business, is to make people feel good about themselves. And sometimes to be able to do that, you need credibility and integrity. So you got to talk about some of the things that you've been able to accomplish in order to get that point across.
Yeah. And I mean, the things you've accomplished, let's talk about the coast to coast run. You not only sign an application in that instance, or don't even do it, you tell people you're going to do it. There's headlines, there's stories, magazines covering it, television. Talk about the journey. What do you remember most about the journey? Can you talk about some particularly tough days where you got up and you did it again?
Yeah. I mean, every day was sort of tough in the sense of, you don't train to run 45, 50 miles a day by running 45, 50 miles a day. You don't train to run a marathon by running 26 miles a day, right? So I had put it out there. Right. And I went out on a limb. I said, I'm going to run across the country. I'm going to average between 40 and 50 miles every single day. And I'm going to arrive at Fenway Park on August 29th, 1978. And I did on that day at that time when I was supposed to. But so much happened, obviously, along the way. So I remember one time I was in Ely, Nevada in the desert. It's about 110, 120 degrees, and I'm running along. I run about 15 miles that morning, and then my left knee kind of gave out. And I said, guys, I can not only can I not run, I can't walk. Like, I'm only 1,000 miles into this. I got 2,500 more miles to go. So they picked me up. My support team drove me to the nearest hospital about 50 miles away. I walked into the emergency room, and the doctor looked at my knee, and he said, how do you think it happened? And I said, I don't know. I was out jogging. And, I mean, if I said I'm running 40, 50 miles a day, he's going to say, well, I got the solution. Stop doing that. So that wasn't the answer. I needed, so for me, I knew I was fit enough for my body to be able to sustain this kind of torture, I guess you could call it in some ways.
Sure.
And I said, I got to figure this out, because I've always been of the mindset, I don't want to treat as much the problem as I want to figure out the cause. If I can figure out the cause, then I can prevent it from happening. If you just treat the problem and not the cause, it's going to keep coming back. So went back into the motorhome. My guys were driving me back to where I had stopped that morning. And as I'm looking at the road, it's really crowned, beveled, I guess you could say, and to let the water run off. And I said, that's it. I'm running all my miles facing traffic on the left side of the road. One leg is doing more work than the other if I'm doing 40, 50 a day. If I'm only doing 3 or 4 or 5, then it's probably not going to be a big difference. But running that kind of mileage made a big difference. So I said, I got to bite the bullet and run on the other side of the road and alternate. And I started alternating. The problem went away.
Yeah, I've never had anybody that could empathize with me on that, because I experienced the same thing running from Tallahassee to Jacksonville. It's only 157.2 miles, but experienced that same thing the first year I did it, and yeah, you're pretty much running kind of like you're running on the beach. The challenge I found, I don't know if you had the same experience on the road or roads that I was on, when you run facing traffic. Either way is a little trepidatious, but it's almost like a big ocean wave hitting you when the trucks are coming the opposite way. Did you experience that? Because they bring that little wake of wind behind them, knocking your hat off, and just, when you've been running 20 or 30 miles that day already, and then you're getting hit with a truck going 65 miles an hour the other way. It's more daunting than you think it might be.
Yeah. I mean, people say, what was the toughest part about the whole thing? And it was just obviously the traffic. Yeah. Because you got a little white line. There's no breakdown lane. They're not expecting you being out there, and you got these 18-wheelers coming by and almost blowing you over. I mean, they're not being reckless. They're just doing their job. But speaking of reckless, so one day I was out in Iowa running, and my support team had to go buy groceries and stuff. So they took off. So I was all by myself, and I'm running, and all of a sudden there's this car is coming towards me, and they veer off the road to try to run me off the road. And I dove into a ditch. And I said, why did they do that? And then they turned around and they come at me again. Same thing. And then they turned around one more time. And as they came at me, the guy in the passenger side opened up his side door to try to hit me. And they just missed me. And, I continued to run. And I just said to myself, why? Like, why are they doing this? And I just came to the conclusion that, people, a lot of times, they just feel jealous of somebody accomplishing something, right? There's a quote in my book. I wrote a book called The Last Pick, and there's a quote in there by Bette Midler that says, toughest part about success is finding people who are happy for you. Yeah. And there's a lot of people out there who are just envious and jealous. They've never even met you, but they don't like you because you're accomplishing things and they're not. Well, there's only one of two ways that they can eliminate that. One is either to get out there and do it themselves, which these two clowns had no intentions of, or to get rid of that thing which is causing their angst, causing their jealousy, their envy. And that was me. And that's the only way I could explain it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's crazy. And thank goodness they didn't get you. And thank goodness they gave up and, I don't know, went cow tipping or did something after they were done messing with you. But that's a crazy experience. And I know you've had so many of them. One you couldn't possibly have, well, maybe you, what do they call it, game planned it. But you were the director of the Boston Marathon, the year of the bombing. Talk about that year. You ran it as well. And then, talk about the years since, and particularly the year immediately after.
Well, the year before was the hot year, 2012. And, it was just, we transported 250 runners to area hospitals, treated 2,500 runners in our medical tents. I was like, oh my God, this is an awful year. So 2013 came and I said, we've got to have a good one here. And woke up that morning, the weather was perfect. I said, thank goodness we got a good year. This is going to be a great race. I get to the start, and that was the year of the Sandy Hook massacre. And we had a 26-second moment of silence at the start. And I stood there and you could hear a pin drop. And here we are just giving, sort of support concept of those who were profoundly impacted by that massacre, and 26 seconds. And little did I know that only hours later, 26 miles away, we would be experiencing our own tragedy right there in Boston. So the day goes on, I'm in a lead vehicle, everything's going great. I get to the finish line, everything's great. My family was in the bleachers, gave them a hug, and then I was getting near the end of the day somewhat, and everything was on automatic pilot. So decided to head back to the start and to do my run. And I get to the starting line. I had 2 state police officers with me and some support guys running with me. And all of a sudden my phone rings. They said, you got to get back here. I said, why? They said, there were 2 explosions at the finish. Explosions? What kind of explosions? And they weren't even sure what they were. So got right back into the car. State police drove me 100 miles an hour down the Mass Turnpike. I'm calling my wife on the phone. Cell service got knocked out. And I didn't know whether my own family was impacted by the bombing. And so I got back to the finish and, just went right back to work. And just had to deal with all of that for the rest of the day. It was surreal, obviously. When I got back there, they had evacuated the whole finish area. So there was only a few of us out on the street. And because they wanted to get everyone out of the area in case there were other devices that might have gone off. But then 6,500 runners were stopped. And we had to decide, what are we going to do with these 6,500 runners? And they wanted to get their gear bags so they could go back to the hotel or go back to their car or whatever. But the police said, no, you can't go to the gear bag buses because we don't know what might be down there. And I said, well, if a few of us volunteers went to the buses and took all the bags off the buses and put them out on the street right here where we know it's safe, is that okay? They said, all right. So we took 6,500 bags off of buses, laid them out. Runners were able to get their gear and leave. We were doing that until like 1 a.m. It was unbelievable how all that went. It was, again, surreal that something like that could happen at a fun, family-friendly event. And it changed the sport, forever. And 2014 came and, we spent 80% of our time on public safety, not putting out water stations or, just course clocks, but just being focused more on making sure that everyone was going to be safe in this year of 2014. And it was the most epic marathon of all times, where we took back Boylston Street, we took back the finish line. And I've always thought that my motto right after that was the comeback is always stronger than the setback. And such was the case in 2014.
Yeah, and having run it for the first time and really gone to it for the first time this past year, it's a wonderful combination of, obviously preserving the history of crowd interaction. And I've never felt as famous as I did just being one of the tens of thousands of runners. And then yet you still feel entirely secure. I mean, the way you all master security, but still access to the runners and access to the crowd is just masterful.
Yeah, I mean, that's a team effort. I mean, the beauty about the Boston Marathon is it's been around for a long time. So you have people who have been involved in this race for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. So they have become the expert in that sort of area of putting on the event. They know their area better than anyone else on the planet. So we're very, very fortunate to have the best possible team of experts who have the experience, who know what they're doing. And same thing with the crowd along the course. We go through 8 residential communities. So people step out of their house and they're watching and they're cheering on the runners, and they know exactly what to say. They know whether they should or shouldn't hand things out. So the support is second to none.
Yeah, no, it's a class act, and Dave, you are a class act. I think I could talk to you for hours, and certainly I encourage anyone hearing your story, to certainly try to get on your very busy calendar to have you come speak to their audience, because you're just a guy who walks the walk and talks the talk, and even more so, you inspire others to do the same, and so the influence that you've had, the dollars you've raised individually, actually pales in comparison to probably all the good you've done by inspiring others, and all the good that they've done indirectly.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, brother. I look forward to seeing you again. Well, there you have it. That was me talking with Dave McGillivray. Wasn't that amazing? I mean, the things he's accomplished, we recounted them during the show, so I won't repeat them here, but just incredible accomplishments that he uses as platforms for doing good. And not only that, he uses his platforms for doing good to inspire others to do the same. And he does it with, I think, the perfect balance of confidence and, taking credit for what he's doing and recognizing them as significant accomplishments, but not taking himself so seriously, instead taking that attention and turning it towards the cause. So I hope that was captured there. I certainly learned a lot from it as a person who has kind of reinvented himself into someone a little bit like Dave, not a lot, but a little bit. It's neat to talk to someone else, because there's only so many people you can talk to that have done those kind of things and done them with the same purpose in mind. So it was therapeutic for me, and I certainly can appreciate what he's accomplished, and it puts my own accomplishments in perspective, both in terms of what they are, but also what they're not, that they're not something that I should allow to become my identity, but that I should use them for encouraging others to do good and to make, the world a better place. If you like this episode, I think you'll also like, or at least potentially be interested in episode 29, when we had Mark Polina, who just recently wrote the Boston Marathon Handbook, longtime runner in the Boston Marathon, tells you a lot about the history and things we didn't really get into in this discussion with Dave, even though he's just as qualified to talk about it, having run 52 times. Jack Fultz, who we mentioned during this episode, we interview him on episode number 27. Jack Fultz, the 1976 winner of the Boston Marathon, the so-called Run for the Hoses, the hottest Boston Marathon on record, over 100 degrees that day. And Jack obviously ran that and several other significant marathons. Really interesting story. And then Jay Birmingham, you might be interested in as well. I didn't get into comparing and contrasting their accomplishments. Jay Birmingham also did a coast-to-coast run. There's only so many people in the world that have done them. We've interviewed 2 of them on the My First Rodeo podcast, but Jay Birmingham did it a little earlier than Dave did, and you heard Dave talk about having support and so forth. Jay tried it a couple of times with support, didn't seem to work. He was distracted by the support, and he's got a record that'll probably stand forever. That is the fastest coast-to-coast unsupported marathon. Why would anybody do it unsupported again? But that's what Jay Birmingham did. I'm pretty sure he did it in 77 days. So, I mean, to even compare and contrast their accomplishments is silly. They're just monumental. And there's something that only a couple people in history have done. And you've got to hear from two of them. Jay Birmingham, episode 27 on the My First Rodeo podcast. Hey, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you will share it. I hope you'll subscribe to the My First Rodeo podcast, and I hope you'll come back and join us next time on the My First Rodeo podcast. My First Rodeo.